Okay, this is Virgil Armstrong. Hi, Virgil.
Hello, how are you?
Can I say Virgil? Is that okay for you?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. To your history, you have been with the CIA, is that right?
At one time, yeah.
Yeah, how long?
9 years.
9 years. People say once CIA, always CIA, so they believe you couldn't say what you say if you were, or you have been with the CIA. How can you say these things about what the CIA doesn't want people to know?
Well, of course, I don't tell a lot of things that I know, and I never will. You know, I still keep an oath of security up to a point. But when it came to UFOs, I said somebody has to speak out, you know, and it wasn't directed towards the CIA. It was directed towards the U.S. government and world government. Mm-hmm. And that's when I, in 1980, broke security. You
quit before that? What happened? Why did you quit, or why did you? What happened at the CIA that you said that has to go?
I had enough. I was 3 times in Vietnam, and of course I was associated also with them in Vietnam. And I just saw the futile futures of the whole thing, and I said, you know, I've had enough of this. Mm-hmm. You know, I had already been in wars, beginning with the Second World War, the Korean War, Civil War in China, 3 revolutions, 3 times in Vietnam, and, you know, on and on and on.
Was
and
enough.
It was enough, right. And so I wanted out. And,
but you didn't see UFOs in Vietnam or something, or did you?
Not in Vietnam, no, but I was in on the capture of the second UFO in the United States in 1948. The most famous capture, though, of course, was Roswell, and that was the Roswell incident. And that was in 1947, the year before I was involved. And then the second crash is what they call the White Sands, New Mexico crash, and that was very highly classified and still is today.
You were involved, like you were on the...
No, just on the White Sands one. I was in on it. But I know a lot about, of course, about the Roswell thing, what happened there and so forth.
You had files from it or something?
Yes, right. And, of course, I was always in intelligence and what they call G2 or CIA. Or because of my intelligence background, beginning with the Second World War, I was stereotyped. And so, consequently, all my assignments... for the most part, had to do with intelligence, which was my main thrust. But I didn't really get involved, deeply involved, in UFOs of a personal nature until after I retired. And it was that time I began to investigate ETs and UFOs in great depth.
On a private basis?
Yeah, just on my own basis.
But it started with
yes,
information you got on this at the CIA, or what?
Well, no, I wasn't. I had just come from the CIA, and I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And then I was placed on temporary duty with the intelligence of then the Army Air Corps, and which later very quickly became the Air Force as we know it today. But it was during that time that I received what we call fax today. It was a Twix. Came across my desk, and of course I was G2 Air. Now G2 Air has to do with all intelligence having to do with strange things in the air, you know.
Phenomena.
Yeah, exactly. And what happened was the commanding general sent me a Twix that he had received from 3rd Army headquarters, stating that a UFO had crashed at White Sands, New Mexico, and was presently under observation. And the observation was to determine whether they had friendly intents or they were hostile, if there was any occupants aboard, you know, and were they men and women or all male or whatever. So a lot of questions were being asked. And through a cordon of security around it, and they kept it under surveillance for a little over 24 hours. And nothing happened. And so then they began to probe the exterior of the craft, trying to find an access into it. And as luck would have it, a phenomena or God or the ETs or whoever, you know, they hit a button from the outside, an emergency button. Down came a door from inside of the craft itself with steps, and of course now we had entry to the ship itself. There were 5 bodies aboard, all of them dead.
Dead bodies?
Yeah, they had asphyxiated. What had happened, ostensibly, they had blown a portal, and so they suffocated, you know, due to a lack of support system.
What did they look like?
Little guys, 3.5 feet.
Is it like the small cries people talk about?
They weren't like the Zeta reticuli grays. No, their eyes were different. The Zeta reticuli grays have almost insectoid eyes, you know. These little guys had nice eyes. They were kind eyes. The 5 occupants, one of them was just under 4 feet, and he obviously was a commander because he had epaulets on his uniform. And one of the smaller ones, the 3.5 feet, also had epaulets, so he was obviously the assistant commander. The rest of them were dressed in very tight-fitting silver uniforms. And so now, characteristically, in other words, the physiognomy, they had no hair, hair anywhere on the body, huge eyes, an outsized head with the body, no ears, because the ears had atrophied. The nose had atrophied. The mouth was immobile, and so it wasn't like our mobile mouth, you know. Yeah. So obviously they communicated with telepathy, and so the bodies were taken off of the craft, and they were flown back to Wright-Patterson for examination. And
Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Yeah,
that's
right, in Ohio.
Ohio.
And of course, they had a very great difficulty getting the uniforms off of them. They couldn't cut it. They tried scissors.
It's not like
it was a material that we didn't know. Nothing like here on the globe, I should say. But they couldn't cut it with scissors, and yet it was thinner than a newspaper page.
Amazing.
It is. So finally, they had to resort to metal shears to cut it, and they finally got the uniforms off of them, and then, of course, they examined the bodies. They were all male. They had male organs, genitals, and what have you, but again, like the ears and the nose, it had atrophied due to non-use, you know. They were no longer sexual and didn't need the ears to hear and all that, so they were different from us, but they were nice little guys, really.
Did they find out where they came from?
They did, but I never learned. It never was reported, of course, in the Twix. But I do know they were good at that time. And my personal opinion about that whole thing was in the first attempt to tell us that they were here, which was a Roswell incident, that Roswell crash was caused by radar.
Yeah.
And
brought the ship down.
Yeah, well, they
wasn't prepared for the radar.
Wasn't prepared for the new radar, and they couldn't read, for instance, their altimeter because they impacted with the ground and scattered over about 10 acres, you know. Out of that, of course, the Roswell incident, we got one live body. And
that was earlier than White
That was
Sands.
1947,
Yes.
right. And 1948 is the crash that I was in on.
Is the same kind of ETs like that in
Yeah,
White Sands?
they were the same,
So
right.
also were not the Greys.
No, they were not the Greys.
So you say that were nice. You call them nice.
I call them
ETs.
nice, benevolent, in other words. Yeah. And
In Roswell, they found one alive.
yeah. Now, what's not known about the Roswell crash, there were 3 crashes, really. And so one of them was later nicknamed Aztecs. 2 of them was the Aztecs crash, and of course we had the Roswell crash, and then the following year we had the White Sands, New Mexico crash. Now, White Sands is where the United States exploded the first atomic bomb, so you know how secure it is and sensitive. And so the government would never acknowledge, even to the military, that a ship had crashed there. Now, the ship was intact. It was not hurt other than a blown portal. It was 100 foot in diameter. And, of course, I told you about the occupants, the bodies. And it was very sophisticated. In those days, we didn't understand it, really.
Today, they are...
Oh, today we
They know
understand
a lot.
everything, sure.
Yes?
Yeah. In my book,
Just from this aliens, or are there different
well,
visits?
from different captures, I would judge that the United States alone probably has around 100 captures.
Is this Area 51, is that real?
Well, Area 51 was the harbor of the Zeta Reticuli Grays.
It's not anymore.
No, they've left, and but there's still a harboring of UFOs there. Yes, and of course the problem today is if you see a UFO, who does it belong to? Is it Russian? Is it American? Is it extraterrestrial? Is it the Hanabu people? Or
Hanabu, that's German.
Germans, yeah, they're in Antarctica. And they're good.
Yeah.
They're good people. I've had them come to my lectures in Austria and then tell my hostess or whoever's in charge, tell Virgil we were here and we like what he's saying. But it's interesting.
Germans?
Yeah.
That live on the Antarctica.
Yes, right. And I wrote an article about Hitler a couple of years ago. It's quite popular. In fact, I think I'll give it to Werner in Munchen when I get down there and have it there for distribution to the people.
I'm interested in that, yes.
Yeah, you'd be interested in that article. Hitler, of course, did not die in the bunker, as everybody said. You know, he escaped.
It was a double?
Well, double, yeah. But he, through the dental plate, they'd identified him as not being Hitler.
Okay.
Hitler,
he did go to the South Pole?
No, he didn't. He and Eva went to Argentina, Buenos Aires.
Yes.
And he lived out his life there, he and Eva, and Hitler lived to be 98 years old.
So he died just like in the 80s or something?
He died, I don't know how he died, but I think just old age, really. Dr. Hertak and I were having breakfast in Zurich, Switzerland, and he said to me, he said, Virgil, he said, the international intelligence community is saying that Hitler was taken off with the UFO. Do you know anything about that? And of course, I was eating breakfast. I wasn't thinking, you know. And I said, no, I don't know anything about it. And then Jim got a phone call, and he got up and left. And the minute he left, I said, oh, my God, it's right on. Hitler had died, and then the Hanabu people, who are in Antarctica, came and got him and buried he and Ivan there, you know.
Okay, now we have aliens that crashed in America. Then we have German flying saucers, so to
Yeah, the Hanabu.
But they existed before the crashes, and so the source for Earth's flying saucers are not the crashes in America and Roswell. And
no, those were extraterrestrial, and they weren't German.
Did Germans have contacts with outer space people?
Yes, they did. Actually, before the United States, in 1929, the Germans were already on the moon.
1929.
1929, Professor Phillips.
What kind of Professor Phillips?
Phillips, yeah. And the Third Reich tried to enlist him to build UFOs so they could win the war, but he said, no. And but the Germans, and I wrote an article about that. What's in that article about Hitler? Why is a small country the size of Germany so special and so strong, and everybody's afraid of them, you know? They're smaller than some of the states in the United States.
True.
And yet they have such a powerful economy. They have a powerful, if they wanted to, a war machine, as they said in the Second World War. They're great scientists, they're great philosophers, they're great mathematicians and what have you. There's a wellspring of them.
Germans don't think of themselves like that. They don't think positive of them.
But when you read history, there it is. It's there.
So,
now the reason for that is that they are overlighted by a special energy. And this special energy comes through a glitch in the solar system grid system. There's a glitch there's a hole in it, you see. So that this hole is directly in line with a constellation called Taurus. And the brightest star of the constellation Taurus is Aldebaran. And Aldebaran beams directly into Germany, and of course gives them the great strength and resources and the things that they are, makes them what they are really, so that they're different from any other nation in the world, and they are special peoples. And
what they don't see, or we don't see that like that, but what probably our history is written from the Americans and the victors.
Yeah, the victors always write history. They have to make somebody bad. They made the Germans bad. But the Germans are no worse than the British, the Americans, and others. They did terrible things also, you know.
That's a hot topic.
That's sure it is, but it's part of war.
Yeah.
you know, unfortunately.
So the Germans had contact with the Aldebaran people, is that right? So
Well, with the energy, yes, and
not,
there were two societies back then: the Vril Society and the Thule Society, and they, of course, were in touch with the Aldebaran energies, and they gave Hitler, along with Victor Schaubar. He, of course, was a genius himself. And so Hitler, it was interesting, Hitler said, "I shall win the war." And he said, "I have a secret weapon." And the Allies laughed at him. They thought it was the B-2 rocket.
Yeah.
And the B-2 rocket on the nose cone, it should have been written, "To whom it may concern," because it had never hit the target, you know. But psychologically, it was
not
really,
a secret weapon.
No, but it was also very deadly because you never knew where it was going to hit, you know. But indeed, American intelligence found out that Hitler did have a secret weapon, and that was the Haunebu. And he built the
It was a weapon or just a
yeah, it's a UFO, flying saucer.
It's not a weapon.
The second one was, yes. The second one, he got up and flying. Now, the first one could do, pardon me, 1,200 miles per hour. That's, about 15 km. The second one would do 3,000, and the third one coming off the drawing board was capable of 8,000 miles per hour. Now, the second one had armament, which was laser. It was capable of penetrating 4 inches of armor. Now, that would have wiped out the sea vessels, you know, and also the tanks and what have you. And so the Allied powers really got frantic at that point in time, said, "We have to stop him. We have to win the war, quick." Consequently, you people suffered so much from the bombings and what have you. But the idea, of course, was to eliminate the Third Reich so they wouldn't win the war. And so it's history. It was a tragic thing. And, of course, thank God I wasn't here. I was fighting over in Asia at that time and against the Chinese communists and the Japanese.
You wouldn't have liked to fight against the Germans?
No, I wouldn't, no.
Okay, now we say the Germans were on the moon. So that's a topic I have dealt a lot with in a movie I've shot. This is a NASA file, and it says, I don't know, maybe it's correct, you correct me, that when Apollo 11 landed on the moon, they did land there, but then something happened because they didn't get out. They waited 6 or 7 hours before Armstrong set his
went
foot
down
on the
ground
moon.
and said,
So something happened there because they didn't plan to wait that long.
There was a UFO watching them, a big one, and they were under observation. We don't know, but apparently, of course, they diagnosed it as being hostile, and I guess in a sense it was, because when they used the moon buggy, that UFO used a fender of the moon buggy and knocked it right off. And it was a warning, you know, and trying to keep us out of there.
So after a while they didn't go to the moon anymore.
Yeah, they're still there. Don't kid yourself, it's still there.
But not with Apollo and Saturn. Then there's the video where you can see the flag of the United States. That's like in the wind. Is there an atmosphere on the moon?
Yes. The dark side of the moon is almost identical to the Earth. There's green trees. There's rivers, lakes.
Unbelievable.
Yes, it is. But so they keep telling us that the moon is void of air and all that. It's window dressing.
Because otherwise they would have to tell us there's someone on the moon.
Yeah. And there are 3 civilizations that live on the moon.
3.
3, yeah. And they basically live on the dark side of the moon, and they also live in the moon, because the moon, like the Earth, is also hollow. And so they monitor us. They don't want us up there. They don't want the Americans, the Germans, the Russians, the British, the French, and whatever. But we're up there.
But Americans too. They're working together with aliens. Is that right?
Well, they're working together. It's a multilateral, you might say, consignment. Every major country is involved. We have nuclear missiles on the moon. And the nuclear missiles are there to deter asteroids and comets and extraterrestrials from coming in and harming us. So we have an off, you might say, an outguard up there, you know. During the Hale-Bopp situation, they were up there and they were manning those weapons, which are missiles with atomic warheads.
So those movies like Armageddon and Deep Impact, there are something added?
There's truth in it, yeah.
And movies like Hangar 18 and
18, yeah, that's a true story. I haven't heard about that one for a long time, but that is a true story. It became Hangar 18 when they enlarged it. Had another designation before that. I can't remember now.
So there's a lot in sci-fi movies that's really happened.
Oh yeah, and you know, it's a funny part too. For instance, say, what was that one about Close Encounters of a Third Kind? Yeah. I experienced that myself, you know, because
like a landing of a UFO or what?
Well, you remember when in that when his vehicles was shaking so?
Yeah.
Okay, that happened to me.
Oh.
I had one beam into me, and I'll tell you, the whole vehicle just shook, and I shook, and everything else. And yeah, I was working with a ET community at that time in Arizona. But what I'm trying to say is this: that all of these movies are designed to educate you and I. So when they step forward and tell the truth, which they're about to do, I feel, we'll say, well, why in the hell did you tell me, you know? And they'll say, oh, we did, you know. We gave it to you in movies, and we were telling you ahead of time.
That's probably what they tried to find out how the population would react.
Yeah.
And they, this radio show from Orson Welles, was that part of it?
That's
War of the Worlds?
That caused the secrecy, yeah.
And they found out, the people react with panic, so we can't tell them. So
right, exactly.
And they built up large secret organizations.
And then it became Catch-21, Catch-22, and of course it was unnecessary.
Today it's hard to break that catch.
Because that's their control over us. Excuse me. There's so many. I told you of one capture. There's many, many captures, you know. There was another incident, of course, in the Kalahari Desert in South Africa. Yeah. The South African government had the ability, they had laser, but they also had maser, which is one step in advance of the laser. And they shot down on the UFO with that. And it crashed in the Kalahari Desert.
The South Africans have
that? The South Africans
have Americans have that too?
Oh, yeah, sure. But,
and then they shot down one craft, and what happened?
And they said, uh-oh, what are we going to do with it?
Then they called the Americans?
They called the Americans and said, would you like to come and get it? And the Americans said, yes. And they did. And
they knew how to handle it.
Knew how to handle it. They flew it back to the United States.
Kalahari.
Yeah. And so they repaired the ship. And now there was one live body still alive. And he had the other bodies laid out in the shadow of the craft itself. And one of the doctors went up to him, and of course, many times they only have 4 fingers, but they have long nails, almost like toes on a cat or something like that, you know. And the little fellow was injured, so the doctor went up to him and wanted to treat him, and he touched him, and the ET came up with his hand, just took his whole side of his face. And, so it was very dramatic. The ET later on died, you know, and he was injured already, as was the one on the Roswell incident. He died too of injuries later on.
Was it the same kind?
I can't say that. I don't truly know. I didn't see pictures of these. I only know the story. But in my book also, if you have read that book, The Armstrong Report, in 1961, the United States, of course, had a craft that took off from Stead Air Force Base, and in less than an hour and a half, it was beyond the moon on its way to Mars. And so they were, in 1961, we were already making flights, and even before, to Mars. And that ship was capable of going in excess to 300,000 miles per hour.
That's fast.
Yes, it is.
That's
And,
more than, is that light speed? No.
Yeah, light speed's 186,000 per second.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
so
Okay.
it's not as fast as the speed of light, yeah. But it just, now that's 61. That gives you some idea of what the United States had at that time. You can imagine what they have today. Yeah. And of course, they learned a lot from the Zeta Reticuli Greys. You know, that was part of the bargain. If we allowed them to use human beings in abductions and for experimental purposes, then they were to give us technology for our UFOs.
That's a So the craze, the deal with the craze is not the same with like the Roswell crash and the White Sands incident. How did they get in contact with the craze? Well, was it a crash also?
No, the Greys landed in outside of Washington D.C. and contacted our presidents.
When was it? About the time of Roswell? Or?
That was just.
It's always mixed up with Roswell.
Yeah, it was during the first the Truman and then the Eisenhower administration. And but Truman was the first one approached, and they actually it was on TV and the newspapers and everything. A whole flotilla of UFOs flew over Washington D.C. for 24 hours.
You see these pictures around the Capitol?
Yeah, right, over the
UFOs,
Capitol and over the White House. And of
so
course,
it's not fake pictures.
no, it's not. It's true. It happened. And then they telepathically, they told the White House that they were to meet them, and they were to talk to them. So they told them where to go, you know. And Truman went along with Forrestal and others, and met with them.
Yes.
He was Forrestal was the Secretary of State.
Right.
And so they looked at the ETs or their ship and said, you know what, they're much more technologically advanced than we are, so all we can do is ask for time, and we can bide time, you know. It took us 50 years to reach a parity with them, and then tell them to go home, which they did.
They did?
They did, yeah. And they were in Area 51.
But they abducted a lot of people. Is that this
yes, they
abduction
did.
stories is
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it's stopped. Or
Yeah.
are they still doing it?
Well, I don't get reports anymore that they are. There still is one race here on Earth, though, that is, they want to take over the planet also, and that's a reptilian race. And and I know they're here and have known it for years due to the guy in Hamburg that I used to work with. Can't think of his name right now, but anyhow, he came to me. I used to go down there and lecture with him on his congresses. I was a speaker, and Govinda was her name. Anyhow, after the show, he would hire college students to break it down for him, you know, and box it up and everything, so that I don't know what he did with it, but I guess he rented that equipment and had to return it. But he was standing there and he was watching these people break the equipment down. And all of a sudden, one of the young men, who ostensibly was a college student, turned around and looked at him. And when he did, he dropped the face of the human being, and there stood a reptile. And he was scared witless, believe me.
I can imagine that.
And of course, he called me early the next morning. He said, "Birch, I got to talk to you. I got to talk to you." And then he told me what happened. And then the pace went back up, and the individual was strictly human again.
So it's just an illusion? It's a trick or something? Or
It's a trick, yeah. They have the
where
ability.
do they come from?
Dracula.
All right. Huh? Oh, that's a
yeah.
system called.
Oh, yeah, way out there. But they would like to take over this planet.
You said they had the ability, sorry, I interrupted you, the ability to change
take on,
their face?
Yeah, to change their face and their physiognomy. And when indeed they are reptilian, you know. But they've been told also that they have to be out of here by the year 2000.
By whom?
By the good forces. In other words, Sirius, Andromeda, and what is it? Pleiades.
Pleiades. So
Yeah.
there are good forces
Yeah, those
who
are
protect Earth.
oh,
Are
yes.
they working together with the governments?
No,
The next-
they don't believe in our government. Your government or mine, really.
Yeah.
The Zeta Reticuli Greys were working with our governments, yes.
They are not so
But
positive forces.
No, they were not positive. They were negative. And the reptilians are negative, but there are many good forces who are, including the Hanabu people, who are doing good things on the planet to help us and to protect us, really. And so, a simple thing. For instance, our nuclear reactors, Chernobyl in Russia, that damn thing could go any moment, it's so unstable.
Yeah.
But so are many of the other reactors around the world. And the good forces, and I'm sure that also includes the Hanabu people, are actually keeping it stabilized so they don't degenerate totally and explode. Because if they did, it could start a chain reaction all around the planet and we'd be dust. So there's a mission of the good ET forces,
So we don't destruct our planet by nuclear...
They're not going to allow it this time, The Hale-Bopp thing is a good example also. Hale-Bopp, of course, was a screen for the companion. That's what they called it, the companion, which was behind Hale-Bopp. It was huge. And actually it was wormwood, the wormwood planet.
That's in the Bible, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, in Revelations.
Yeah.
Anyhow, the object was for it to get close enough to us and cause us to flip our axis. And then, of course, it would destroy most of us, They
wanted to do that.
They wanted to do that, right. And
Wormwood is a planet or a craft? Or
it appears as a planet. Yes, it is a planet. But it also has the ability to drive itself.
And it's manned by people.
It has an intelligence, right. And in the book I wrote, the latest book I wrote, it's called The Way Home. I talked about the wormwood planet, and I said that it was the home of the lesser gods, and which it is. Now, I'm talking about divine intervention. They wanted to flip the axis of our planet and destroy us. The Syrians and the Andromedans and the Pleiades all got together. And in the meantime, also, we had gone up to the moon and manned our nuclear warheads up there with the missiles,
Ready to fight.
Ready to fight, yeah. But that's like, pardon my French, peeing in the wind. And it took divine intervention, extraterrestrial intervention of a friendly sort to deter, number one, wormwood. They said, get out. You're not going in there and flip the axis this time. We are protecting that planet. So they dematerialized and left. And then they shunted the Hale-Bopp. Was it an asteroid? A comet, huh? Can't remember an asteroid or a comet, but anyhow.
Comet, I think.
Yeah. they then deflected it, and it went in and it hit Jupiter. So Jupiter would be like a flea biting an elephant, it's so big. And so we were spared, of course, being destroyed. So
Wormwood too?
No, Wormwood went out. She's still out there.
So that's just a shield?
Yeah, it's outside of our solar system. Yeah.
Okay. So they're traveling around and...
Yeah, they watch us all the time.
Bothering other people, other planets?
I don't know if they do that or not, but they consider us to be their property. And they also put us here, as human beings, genetically altered, yeah.
So basically they are right, but they are not, they don't possess us.
No, they use us like we use cattle and sheep, and that's the way they think of us. And so they do not have our best interests at heart. And so anyhow, but all of that is over. There'll be no destruction of our planet as many of them would like to see. It won't happen because we are divine. And then there's a divine scenario that goes along with it in that everything, every eye in the universe is on planet Earth at this very time.
There's something special happening.
We are special, yeah.
Why are we special? What is special here?
Well, it's a long story. In the book I talked about it. I said we are the experiment of negativity for the Creator God, which we are. And you and I were talking earlier about a world of illusion.
Yeah.
This was purposely created. It was an Alice in Wonderland invention, so to speak. And everything that we think is real is really not only confusion but illusion. in a dream. It's not real at all.
So what's real is the spiritual. The spiritual level is real. The matter is not.
Matter's not. No.
Doesn't matter. Matter doesn't.
Matter, right? Yeah, matter is illusion.
Yeah.
And but we've been taught to believe that it's real, when in reality, as I said, it's Alice in Wonderland. And
this is a long story. That this goes how long? Millions, thousands,
yeah,
hundreds, millions.
well, whatever the 10-year course of the planet is, if we go back millenniums, you know. What we're doing, we're looking at the wrong side of the mirror. We're going to have to turn the mirror around, look at the right side, so we come back to reality.
Yeah.
And many of us are, but unfortunately, as of right now, there's about 2 billion people out of the 6 billion who are aware of such things.
So that's not bad.
No, it's not bad. At least that's 1/3.
Yeah.
And I feel, you know, with some of the things we were talking about early, the AIDS thing, the children being born half PT and half human, you know, good things are happening, you see. And the future is not as dismal as many would like to believe, you know.
So that's just what TV makes us believe.
Yeah, they want us to believe that so they can control us, right?
They're feeding us fear,
yes,
violence,
you bet.
every day.
Right on. Control
And then
fear.
If they wouldn't do that, they wouldn't
Well, then
control us.
we could hopefully then realize that we are gods in amnesia. And indeed we are. The Bible, for instance, Jesus told the Pharisees, know ye not that ye are gods. In your book it's written that ye are gods. You know, it's in the Bible. And so when I say that we are gods in amnesia, I'm not saying that. Jesus said it. And I quote him very often because his truth was so right on, you know. For instance, what you sow, you shall reap. You know, you sow wheat, you get wheat. You know, you sow hate, you get hate returned. Sow love, you get love in return. So it's a simple axiom.
Okay, what's the cure for fear? What can we do?
Well, it's an individual task, you know. If you return to God, then there is no fear. In other words, God is the ultimate. It's usually the lack of God or the belief in God that fear takes first place or takes place in the first place. You know?
Are you talking of the God of the Bible, or is it another concept of God?
Well, you know, labels are dangerous. But since I lecture all over the world, I have to go along with, you might say, planetary thinking. Yeah. Who knows God? God is an energy, really. God is an intelligence, but there's no substance.
If we read the Bible, there's a lot of violence in the name of God.
In the name of God. But that's the lesser gods.
That's
Jehovah. And I said that in my book, and that's when I got in trouble, because there were people who said, how dare you say that Jehovah is a bad God? Well, he is, on one hand. And on the other hand, of course, he's an instrument of the Creator. And he was designed to allow the Creator to actually experience its own negativity through you and I here on this planet. You know, that was the premise and the thesis of the book, was to try to wake people up so that they didn't operate and live in a world of illusions. You know, when I wrote the book, of course, I wanted to, you know, jab them and get them awake as much as I could, and I did.
And things are happening. The world is changing. The consciousness is thriving.
Yes. And you know, in Germany, 5 or 6 years ago, I was telling the people this was going to happen. And I'll say this, and I'm not bragging when I say it, everything I've been ever told to tell people has come true. Now, usually it didn't happen 10 or 15 years later, but everything I said came true. The time frame I couldn't give. 5 or 6 years ago, I was saying this, and we're talking about these children today, the dolphin children. They could stay underwater and play just like dolphins do, you know. And
they do?
Yeah, they can do
it. In America or
all over the world, but particularly in America.
How many are they?
I don't know the exact numbers, but it is phenomenal. In fact, there was a German magazine. I have it in my briefcase. On the cover was a dolphin child playing under the water. And it's reputed now that there are some children who can stay underwater for at least 1 hour. Now, you tell me that isn't a change, huh?
It's a change.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have the half ET, half human babies coming in right now. And I don't know, it's remarkable. We go along in life as though nothing's happening, but yet around us at every moment there's transformational changes. And, of course, now one of the things that makes us so special, whether you can believe it or not, there's a lot of love on this planet. You know, we don't hear about it because it's not news, you know. And the killings and the wars and all the negative stuff, that's news, you know. But they never talk about the good things that are happening, and they are happening. And so it delights me. I'm tickled with it.
You can see it everywhere,
Yeah.
but not on the media.
Oh, no, not in the media, no. And,
then we have war. Why do we have war in Yugoslavia now? And
well,
Iraq?
to feed the coffers of the Illuminati and the trilateralists, you know, to make them richer and more powerful, and to keep us divided. In other words, keep nations divided, one against the other, so that they can control them. If we were all to come together as a peoples, and if we were all to come together as nations, and say enough, then the Illuminati and the trilateralists and every other controlling fact would be over, you know. But we don't do that. We, of course, believe that we are supposed to die for our country, the good old alma mater, you know. And there has to be a victor and there has to be a loser, which is insanity.
Yes.
It really is.
Now we fight for humanity. That's a paradox.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, so that's what we're supposedly doing in Yugoslavia,
Yeah,
you know. But
So
why
it's a
did the
good
war start in the
it's
first
good
place?
to drop bombs.
Yeah, and kill people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to
it's
save people from killings, and we kill people.
to do it. Yeah. So it's insanity, you know. And I was in so many wars myself, and of course I didn't realize it then that war was insanity. And my third time in Vietnam, though, I knew it. I said enough, no more. And
Do you believe that this war could end in a bigger war, in a world war, or do you believe
mean
it does?
the Yugoslavian war?
Yeah, could it?
No.
It's not happening.
There will be one more great war. It will happen in the Middle East. And Israeli, the Palestinians, the Syrians, and what have you. The Middle East is you might say, the umbilical cord of the planet. And momentous things, if they're going to happen in terms of a major war, will happen in the Middle East. I had communications with the extraterrestrials, one particular ship, 1975. And they showed me the whole scenario of the future, what was going to happen in the Middle East. And that's how I know this, you know.
So there are prophecies that there's a third world war and here in Europe that the Russians are coming in. Is that happening?
Well, if you believe in ancient prophecy, it says that the Chinese will come in, the Red Hordes.
So it doesn't have to happen anymore.
No, human consciousness, if it will change, I don't want it, and it's not going to happen, can change it. I have a lecture which is called Ancient Prophecy in the Future. And the first thing I tell the people is that prophecy can be changed. If you don't believe it, it's not going to happen. And obviously, in our case, you know, Armageddon, we're in Armageddon right now. It's happening.
But it's not the end of the world, it's a change,
No,
a
it's just
transformation.
a transformation, right. And now, recently, there was a man in Germany who discovered how to decipher the Nostradamus Chronicles, you know. And he found in ancient manuscripts in some of the monasteries, and Nostradamus had prophesied up to 300 years, or 2,300 years. And of course, what he said was good. We're going to go to a change, yes. But eventually, we'll have the land of milk and honey and light and love and all the things that we want. Eventually, we will.
There's 1 year you hear a lot about, that's 2011, 12, 13.
Yeah, 2011 and 12.
What's going to happen?
That's the Mayan prophecy. Well, that's the end of consciousness as we know it. And by that time also, we should be in the photon belt. We're near that right now, and that's why these transformational changes are taking place. The photon belt is how shall we say, the home of the Christ. And the eminence of the photon belt is bathing our planet in love and light and balance and transformation.
What's the Christ? Is it consciousness?
The Christ, the Christ consciousness, right. And
so that has to happen because it's a cosmic Earth circle?
Yeah,
so
and also to prepare us for ascending into the fourth and fifth dimension, which we're going to do. And at least 1/3 of us right now will, 2/3 will not. And many times the question is asked, what happens to them? And so remember we were talking earlier, and I said it's like going to school. If you fail a grade, then you repeat it. Well, they will come back.
So there's reincarnation, and they will incarnate on...
on the new planet Earth. Yeah. This planet, if you want to look at it, let me put it this way. Every planet and everything in God's creation is binary. By that I mean that there's two of each, So there's two planet Earths. There's one up here in the fourth dimension, there's one down here in the third dimension. As the third dimensional planet goes up, the fourth dimensional planet comes down. And we go up in the fourth dimension, they come down from the fourth dimension into the third dimension.
So what kind of development do...
The ones who did not make it, they come back here and do it all over again.
I see.
So God has an engineer plan for everything, He doesn't play games, He does it for real. He's a coyote sometimes, but He does. It's
but
a game
plan.
We can't
die anyway, we can't die. There's no...
Life is eternal, and of course we've been taught that we are supposed to die. But even that's changing. Look, I'm 76 years old. My father died at 44, and then I thought he was an old man. Here I am, almost double that.
Yeah. But that's just your body. If you die, you're still... consciousness is still...
The consciousness goes on, and in the consciousness, of course, is the real part of you. It's not the body.
Okay, we talked about the year 2012 or something. Are there other sources that is there time travel? Did anybody on Earth see into that future or in the past? Is there time travel?
Some say they can. I'm not just sure they can. Because I believe that the future is here as we sit and talk, and he stands over there. That's the future. It happens moment by moment. Prognostications, prophecy, and what have you are meant to be changed. And we can change it as the gods we are with our own consciousness and our own thinking. Thinking is more real than the body ever thought of being, Every bad thought you have is recorded. Every good thought you have is recorded. The bad thoughts you have is recorded in what they call the lower astral. The good thoughts you have are recorded in the higher astral. Now the astral plane we must pass through before we can go on into the fourth and fifth dimension. We have to go through that first. And that's when the calculations are made as to what you did here on earth. It's not God, it's not Jesus or anybody else. You do it. No, you are the sum total of your thinking. So the good thoughts are registered, the bad thoughts. If the good thoughts outnumber the bad thoughts, they say, pass, go home. So there you are. So, excuse me, every time that you have a bad thought about something or somebody, it's recorded. And later on, you're going to have to deal with it. There's no such thing as a free lunch, so to speak.
So we should change our thinking and stop judging people?
Exactly, right. We've been taught to do that. I can't say that the people are wrong. Werner knows I have a workshop, it's called the 7 Principles. Love, and there's forgiveness, there's control, there's judgment, there's fear, bad thoughts, and bad emotions. So the workshop covers all these subjects in 2 days, and teaching people not to judge, not to fear, and not to love the wrong way or forgive the wrong way. There is a right and wrong way to love, There's conditional love and there's unconditional love. Jesus taught us unconditional love. As an example, and I laugh about this many times because I use it in my lectures and workshops, my mama said, now, Bud, if you do this, I'll love you. There's
that's a condition.
Yeah, that's conditional love. It's controlled. And of course, we have to get away from that, But we don't know any better until, of course, we reveal the truth to the people who can hear it, you know. Our actions, of course, and I try to live my life as an example for many around the world. And sometimes it's disappointing because I think that there should be a surge all over the planet, the things I say, whatever, but that's ego.
But on the other side, it's fascinating what's going on.
Oh, yeah, on the other side, it's recorded over there what I'm doing, just as it is for you. And, yeah.
You talked before about the moon is hollow and
Yes.
the earth is hollow.
Yes.
We don't know much about that. Huh?
Well, I have workshops on that also.
It's a big topic.
Yes, it is. The Earth is hollow, as is the moon, and of course every other planet. If you stop and think, material, for instance, in a planet and what have you, it spins at a high rate of acceleration. So the material itself is more or less flung out into the periphery of the planet. I remember when I was a farm boy, raised up on the farm, I used to carry milk. And I'd look around and see if anybody's watching, and I'd take the bucket like this, and I'd start swinging like this, and all of a sudden I'd take it over my head, and I would spin it, you know, never drop a thing.
Yeah.
But when I'd look up and see the milk in the bucket above me, there was a hollow content within the milk itself.
Oh.
So this is the same principle with the planets, you see. Our Admiral Byrd, the United States Admiral Byrd, actually gained entrance inadvertently through the North Pole. There's two entrances to the hollow Earth, one in the north and one in the south.
How big are they?
Oh, tremendous. 4,000 miles across, the one in the north.
Why don't they tell us?
They don't want to tell us. In fact, it's guarded very closely. There's an Air Force base in the North Pole to guard anybody from trying to get in there. I know because I was invited on an expedition in there, and I said, "You're out of your mind." And they went ahead and did it, and the Air Force came up and landed them and said, "If you ever try it again, you know, you're dead." And then this crazy guy called me again and said he was going to try it again. And I said, "Good luck." Asked me to say, you know.
You've never seen him again?
No, never saw him again, never heard from him again.
What's in the Earth? Are there living people, or what's in it?
Oh, yes. There are many different varied people. I have a copy of, you ever hear of Admiral Byrd's diary?
Yes.
Okay, I have a copy of it. And he described what he was seeing once the ice broke away. He was over, it looked like Hamburg, or it looked like Hanover or Bremen, all these beautiful trees, you know, and countryside and what have you. No ice, no snow. It was paradise. And, of course, he couldn't get over it. And then he looked at his compass. His compass was totally wild, couldn't register anymore. And he was flying in what they call a C-47, an old propeller-driven craft. Then two Flugerods. Get this, Flugerods. Yeah.
Are they called like that?
Yeah, they called them Flugerods. Two UFOs, Flugerods.
It
Came
sounds
up.
German. Huh?
It is German. Yeah, and when they were leaving, they said, "I'll be the same." German again, you know.
So Germans are living inside the Earth.
Yeah. You know, some of them are. Well, there are many civilizations in the Earth. The Germans happen to be one of them, and a very advanced society there, apparently, from all we can learn. Admiral Byrd, of course, so the thing was that two UFOs took over his craft. They said, "Admiral, let go of the controls. We'll fly you in and we'll land you," which they did. And then out came from the city, a beautiful city was there, and out of the city came a little hovercraft that did not touch the ground, came up and told the admiral to get aboard and took him back into the city to meet with the commander, who was the big boss of all those things. And Byrd had a conference with him, and the commander, the one in control, asked him to go to the United States government and the president and asked them to stop experimenting with atomic weapons because they were disturbing their eco, what do you call it?
And if you have a hollow Earth, then
Yeah.
any inner Earth
With their atmosphere
nuclear,
and
experiments
ecology and everything
are pretty
else.
dangerous.
Yeah, it was. So Byrd did. He went and he met, of course, with the president, and they swore him to secrecy and told him he was never to talk about this.
The American president.
Yeah, right. Because he had gained access to the Hollow Earth. And he died not talking because they threatened to kill him or strip him of his military rank and harm his family, so he wouldn't do it. But a nephew of his was in the CIA the same time I was, and he told me some of the things about his uncle, you know. And
there was another expedition of Admiral Byrd to the South Pole.
That was the South Pole, right. And I talk about this in this article I was telling you about. He got wiped out by the Honolulu.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
He was not alone. It was a big expedition.
He had an expeditionary force. He was given 8 months to dig the Germans out of there, the Third Reich, and because they were a threat to the world at that time, because they wanted to establish the Fourth Reich, so, you know, supposedly, and go back to warring with the world and to be a dominant power in the world. And what happened, though, Byrd went in after him, and in 2 weeks' time he was finished. I mean, psychotronics were used. We never even knew about psychotronics in those days. And airplanes would be moving through the sky like this, and all of a sudden they would hit an invisible barrier, and poof, explode, crash, and what have you. So he was losing men and equipment right and left. In 2 weeks, he wired the United States government and said, I can't do it. They're far superior than we are. Now, fortunately, the old diehards, the old Third Reich and SS and what have you, they were up in age, and they steadfastly died off. And then the young people, they're youngsters, you know, began to take up the command positions. And they said, and I think they were contacted by the Hollow Earth people too. And they said, we're not going to fight anymore. We want to, if we do fight, it's for the salvation of mankind. Not to destroy the planet or control the planet.
Peace? They are living in peace on the inside of the earth?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to come to an end. What's coming up? Do you think the government will tell us that there are UFOs?
Yes, I do. I've been saying it for the last couple of years that they're about ready to do it. For instance, President Clinton has been working with the astronauts, Edgar Mitchell for one, Cooper's another one. He's working with the right-hand man of Rockefeller. His name is Scott, Commander Scott. And Dr. Greer has also been in there working with the president. And they have videos ready to go. And your government has it also. One video will be released to the whole world simultaneously with the same message. And the message is, yes, we have been involved with the ETs for over 50 years. And we apologize, but now it's time that you know the truth. Basically, that's it.
So probably that they let you say what you say is, they want people to know it. They want to be the people to be prepared.
Yeah.
So
to a point.
They let you speak and don't kill you. They could have killed you. They tried.
Well, they tried. Yes, they tried to kill me 3 times, but then they met with me in Berlin. I think that wasn't up there with Leszek. That was, I think, 1991 or 92, 93, I can't remember when. And they came to me, a representative asked me to meet him in Berlin, which I did. And his basic message was that the government liked what I was saying,